welcome to another episode of Embracing Wisdom with Stacie. I had such a fun week asking you guys, some of my viewers and some of the people in my wellness groups and on my Instagram page, to give me questions. What do you want to know? And I was excited about some of the questions. I got lots of questions and I wanted to answer those just sort of in the order that they came in. I got quite a few, and then some of them I'll save for another podcast because they could kind of go into a direction that I already have as a topic list. So I'll hold those, but thank you so much for those of you who did ask questions. It was super fun. I thought some of the questions were incredibly random and some were very thoughtful and really made me think. So let's get going. The first question that came was, how exactly did you end up living in your childhood home? And not everybody knows that I live in the house I grew up in. But those of you that do or have heard that in some of my stories or interviews or just in some of my conversations, like, how does that happen? Especially in these times where people tend to move a lot. And I live in a military town. And so there's constantly people moving in and out. And so how it came to be was way back when I believe my mom was pregnant. Her and my father built this house, and my mom lived in this house for 48 years, and she got a wild hair to move to Florida. And I was in a place in my life, I was sort of between a couple things, a couple relationships. I was just sort of in a landing spot, wasn't sure what direction I wanted to take. I was busy working, I was creating my business, things were good, but I was renting a home. I had left a relationship where I had a big house and pretty much everything I could ever ask for, and I was starting from scratch. So initially, when my mom told me she was moving, I, of course, was heartbroken because my mom and I are really close and spend a lot of time together. But I really didn't think about buying this house. It was not something that I immediately thought of. And then one day, while she was in Florida house hunting for herself, I came over here when she wasn't here, and I looked at this house through the lens of a potential buyer instead of the house that I lived 18 and a half years in. That was her house that had wallpaper everywhere, heavy drapes, the whole shebang. And I looked at it as the potential buyer. And the space that I'm in right now was, when I was a little girl living here, it was the backyard. And then in my teenage years, my parents built a sunroom on the exterior of the house that had a hot tub in it. The paneling is very 1985. And my mom eventually got rid of the hot tub, and this became her office. And so I came in as a potential buyer and saw this space as a yoga studio. And so that started me thinking in a bigger way. And then I have a 4-car garage that's detached on the property. And I've always had a vision that that building would be an apartment, or that I would one day live in a place where there was an apartment for my daughter to live somewhat independently, and that we would have a house with a house and she would share a backyard. And I just had always been saying that from the time she was a young girl or a teenager, that we would one day share a space, a house with a house, and we would share a backyard. And so that's not where she's at now. That building out there has great potential. Right now, it's being used as an art studio and an archive and a workshop, and there's just a lot out there. And maybe someday she'll live out there in an apartment, but right now she has an apartment in my house. I renovated my house and went from a 4-bedroom to a 3-bedroom and created an apartment studio for her, where she has her own mini kitchenette. She has a living space, a recreation space, and then a sleeping space. So it works, but it came kind of unexpectedly that I would purchase this house. And making a big purchase with family can always be a little bit dicey, but my mom and I both agreed that I would pay the appraised price. There wouldn't be a big discount. There wouldn't be anything other than just, we didn't use a realtor. So that was a benefit for both of us. So I bought the house. First thing I did was take down drapes and chandeliers and wallpaper. And now I've made it my own. I've remodeled a good chunk of the house to make it my own. I got all new flooring. There's not a stitch of carpet in the house. A beautiful bathroom that is dreamlike, it's spa-like, it's amazing. The thing that I love the most about this house is I live in a cul-de-sac, and the 5 neighbors within the cul-de-sac, just up until recently, 4 of the 5 in the cul-de-sac are original owners. So that's really uncommon to have the neighbors. And so the lady next door to me, I always joke, my friend Wilma next door, Wilma babysat me when I was a newborn, when I was just a toddler. I would go to Wilma's house, and now Wilma's a very old lady, and I babysit her, and I mow her grass, and I tend to her weeds, and take her trash can in and out for her, and just sort of watch over her. And so there's a lot of roots here, and I thrive in my root chakra, which we'll talk a little bit about that. I got a good question about what is an energy center or a chakra. I live in my root chakra. I live in stability. Deep roots keep me grounded. And so when I'm spending time in the backyard, which is my favorite place of this home, I remember my dad laying down the railroad ties, and me thinking I was, Nadia Comaneci, Olympic gymnast, and doing balance beam work on the railroad ties. And now, as a present day 53-year-old woman, when I go out and I water my garden, I think about that, and I see the railroad ties, and I see that my parents put in the foundation for something beautiful that I've nurtured and created into. It's an oasis back here. It's just the most beautiful space. Everything grows just so wonderfully and beautifully, and I really do love it. So that's how I came to live in my childhood home. My parents didn't die and leave me the house. I bought the house. My mom moved. When she first came back the first time to visit, it was a little weird. It took a while for me not to feel like I was living in my mom's house, but now it's mine. And when she comes, it's mine, and it's all good. All right, next question. This question, I've answered a few different ways. I'm going to do Reader's Digest. The question is what led you to teach adaptive yoga? And my answer to that in shortest form is I knew that I did not want to teach pretty yoga. I knew that I wanted to bring yoga to people who were limited by some sort of barrier. And that barrier could have been being incarcerated. It could be homelessness. It could be obesity. It could be mental illness. It could be disability. It could be poverty. I wanted to reach people who had a barrier to being able to walk into a traditional yoga studio, pay the $25, and lay on the floor. That didn't interest me at all. I have done it. I've taught in studios. I've taught in gyms. I have a beautiful yoga studio where able-bodied people come and experience amazing yoga. But my heart always knew I wanted to bring yoga into places where the people who were in those places couldn't access traditional yoga. And so I sort of paved this niche, however you say it, to bring yoga to the people. And I've worked in all kinds of settings: assisted living, group homes, rehabilitative homes. I've worked in hospice. I've been bedside with the death and dying. I've worked in traditional nursing homes, the gamut. And schools, I've gone into school settings and taught kids, lots of different places. And I love teaching in my studio. I love more teaching in the community and crossing that barrier and bringing yoga and mindfulness into places where people would not otherwise have access to. The long story that I won't get into, because I talked a little bit about in the very beginning of this podcast, was my daughter, born with multiple disabilities. It just really opened up a whole world to me that people like her are just as deserving and wanting to have access to the things that maybe you and I might take for granted. So I knew that was the path that I wanted to take, and why she appeared in my life 30 years ago. Her birthday's tomorrow. She'll be 30. So, all right. Question number 3. How has this last hip surgery been compared to the other 3? This one came from Stephanie. And I would say the 4th hip surgery, my actual hip replacement in February of this year, was not super hard. It was pretty expected, other than I had a femur fracture during surgery while he was hammering in the implant. My femur fractured. That was obstacle number one that I thought would be the only obstacle. I actually have had 5 surgeries on this hip. So my 5th surgery, which was the revision in April, that surgery, this last hip surgery has been the hardest surgery of all my orthopedic surgeries. The blood clot, the infection, the decisions, the unknown, the delays, the hospital stays, the ER visits, all of it has been extremely hard. On the other side of the coin, because I always feel there's 2 sides, there has been so much goodness that has come since April 4th. And I've seen humanity rise into a place of deep compassion and generosity and greatness that maybe in our day and time we forget that people have the potential for that. I have gotten so much clarity on the importance of my well-being. And, I think moms in general tend to put themselves lower on the priority list. And I think for the last 33 years, my needs have been way down on the list. And for the first time in my life, as far back as I can remember, my needs matter the most. What I need, what I want, what I hope, what I dream, I'm at the top of the list. And that's the first time, even as a child, I remember trying to manage how other people felt and not wanting to rock the boat and always being the good one and being the clean room girl and just being perfect. And so there was a perfectionism that came out of the need to please others, which is a form of taking care of other people instead of taking care of myself. And then becoming a young mom and then having a child with a disability and going through a divorce and being a single mom, like my needs went out the out the window. And for the first time in my life, I have made choices that are good for me. And so, yes, this has been the hardest experience of my life on my physical body, emotions, not knowing, just the struggle, the pain, the physical pain, the emotional pain, hard. But through the process of hard has come an amazing outlook on my life and a perspective shift, a mindset shift, and priorities have changed a lot. I take care of Stacie now, and it feels amazing. It feels amazing to take care of me. So yes, it's been hard, but there's been some great stuff. All right, question number 4. This one came from Mackenzie. She's one of my online followers. And she asked, is it hard to not get emotionally crushed from seeing tragedy? Is it hard to not get emotionally crushed from seeing tragedy? So the population of people that I teach yoga to, most of them have suffered traumatic brain injuries. So like you and I going about our daily life, an event happens, a tragedy occurs, and the life that we know is forever changed and gone. And it is hard. There is some techniques that I have that I've developed in my craft and in my career that help me from being emotionally crushed, because it can be. I am grateful, number one, that I'm not an empath in the true definition of being an empath. I don't feel other people's pain. I can sit with their pain, sit with their tragedy, sit with their sadness, but I don't absorb it or take it on as my own. I don't feel it. There, in my whole 17 years, seeing hundreds of students with hundreds of different stories of how they came to obtain their traumatic brain injury, I can think of maybe 2 individuals that I have felt that emotional crushing, that the tragedy is just so much. And maybe it's because they're young, and maybe there's just something about their spirit that I really connected with, that those I've had to work really hard to not let them crush me. But I can think of a student who I currently work with who was a drowning survivor at age 18 months, and he's in his 50s now. So his entire life has been with a traumatic brain injury from nearly drowning. And he still talks about it and wonders what his life would be like. That's hard. That's really hard. You know, the young guy who's heading out on a bike ride and had just gotten married and just started a career and bought his first home and was hit by a car. That's hard. You know, I've had students that have been assaulted, a lot of assaults, and it's the tragedy that comes at when it comes from the hands of somebody else is where it's really, really, really tragic. And the thing that helps me to not be emotionally crushed from sitting with tragedy is to see the resiliency of the human spirit and to see that people can be stripped of everything, their career, their family, their purpose, their ability, their independence, and yet their spirit is so resilient. They are so forgiving. They are so bright in realizing how grateful they are to be alive. And one of my favorite authors, Richard Rohr, he talks about second half of life living. And for most people, we live in the first half of life until we're in our 50s. And our job in the first half of life is to obtain things, to get things, whether it's material things, relationships, build a family, buy a house, get a career, have friends. And then the second half of life is more about the depth of those relationships, the feelings and sensations that we experience rather than getting. And I feel like somebody who has an event in their life that causes a traumatic brain injury, they immediately bypass first half of life living, and they're living in the second half of life where people have a deeper appreciation of relationships and purpose. And so I don't get emotionally crushed because I'm so inspired by the human spirit and resiliency. There's been a couple times where I do feel crushed. And so I keep a notebook in my car and I write down things people have said, experiences, ways that I felt, and that kind of discharges it. I also have a practice of as soon as I'm done with a home or a facility, I take a walk, whether it's around the block or on a trail or through a shopping center. I try to walk and just, step it out. I also will go into nature and just touch a tree, or I'll wash my hands. I'll go into a restroom and just wash my hands and just feel that I'm washing off their tragedy. I'll shake my arms. I'll take a breath outside. I'll look at the sky. I'll embrace my body. There's so many ways that I can discharge that tragedy. And when I first began this practice, this way of teaching, I was told by a therapist to, at the end of every day, light a candle and take a huge breath in. And as you blow out the candle, you blow out the energy that you took on that day. And so I did that for many, many years. And occasionally I still will if I have a very heavy day. But for the most part, just walking, being in nature, gardening, kind of discharging is what keeps me from feeling crushed. So that was a great question from Mackenzie. All right, let's switch gears. Have you always gardened? No. Way back when the kids were little, I had a beautiful garden, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And things worked. Like I grew a lot of things and it was fun, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I don't remember really eating anything that I grew. It was more just like I loved growing things like pumpkins, and maybe the kids liked it. I don't even remember. It's a fog. But then during COVID, because I live in the house I grew up in, back in the corner, there was where my sandbox used to be and my swing set. And this is how healing living in your childhood home can be. Peeling the wallpaper, the layers of your life coming off. Really cool story there. But I scooped out all of the lava rocks and all of the sand. And I created an 8x8 garden, just an 8 foot by 8 foot square. That's all that was. And I started my first veggie garden in 2020. And it was great. It was great. I had great success. And so then why not get bigger? So the next year I built an additional raised bed. Why not get bigger? So then I added pots and I added trellises, and it just evolves. Every year there's a little bit more. I now have wildflowers all around the garden bed. So at the height of season, it's not only providing food for me that I do eat now, but it's beautiful. And it's like every day there's something new. Every day there's something blooming or something growing. And I love that. And and healing. You know, I took that childhood energy, the hours I spent in the sandbox and in the swing set, and I put it into present day. And I love that. And when I remodeled my office, which was my childhood bedroom, I peeled off layers of wallpaper. My mom loved wallpaper. And I peeled off, you know, what she put on after I moved out. And then I peeled off the next layer. There was like my teenage years. The next layer was my, I don't know, 5 years old to 13 wallpaper, orange, yellow, green stripes, very 70s. And then the final peeling was the nursery wallpaper when the house was built and I was 6 months old. So I got it down to bare walls, and it wasn't drywalled. It was just plain sheetrock because they just slapped wallpaper right onto that. And so I wanted to put drywall, stucco-y stuff, whatever that wall treatment is, before I painted. And so I wrote a love letter on a blank wall in my office that was my childhood bedroom. And I told my little child who slept 18 and a half years in that room how valuable she is, how amazing she is, and how she will do great things. So I wrote a love letter to myself, to my little girl self, my present day self, and then I textured over that and painted over it. I did the same with the flooring. I ripped up that carpet and I wrote affirmations on the dry floor before the flooring went on. So the energy is so good. So that's why I love living in the house I grew up in. There's so many good memories. There's so many hard memories, but I've turned those inside out and made something great out of it. All right, have you already always gardened? So no, kind of a newbie, but I'm getting it and it's so fun. This year I'm putting worms in my garden. So, all right, what do you do in your free time, especially that you aren't as mobile? I was just talking about this the other day. So in the winter time, I love to crochet. So my mornings and my evenings, I crochet. It's very meditative to me. It's quiet. Sometimes I put music on in my headphones. Sometimes I don't. And I just listen to the sound of the needle running through the yarn. And that is really good. Wintertime, I'm a crocheter. And then come spring, I start to spend more time outside, but it's too cold. Things aren't growing yet. I don't need to water. So I kind of, during the surgery time, really found a love for jigsaw puzzles. But because I have cats, I can't have jigsaw puzzles. So I do them on my iPad. And that's sort of my end of day, emotionally crushed from tragedy. I just pop up one of my jigsaw puzzles and do a jigsaw puzzle to end my day, to finish my day, and it's very quieting. I am starting to walk more. I am spending some time in my yoga studio, doing more stretching, doing a little bit of weight work, doing a little bit of ballet work to try to rebuild some of those muscles around my hip. And that's been really good. So my free time habits change seasonally because I prefer to be outside and I don't want to be sitting inside crocheting when I can be out in the garden. All right, speaking of cats, this question came from somebody who watches my YouTube yoga. Your cats pop in and out of videos. My black cat, my black and white one you'll never see. But my black cat, Leo, he's sleeping over there, pops in and out of videos. And the question is, do you prefer cats or dogs? I say this with all respect to cat lovers. I made the mistake once. I made the mistake twice. Never again. I got a cat. He was cute. He was black and white. He was playful. Now he's just a big fat sloth that sheds. So we got Leo, the little black fuzzy cat. He's so cute, long hair. Mistake number two. He's a nuisance. He's very playful. He's very kitten-like. He's 5 or 6 years old and he's very playful, but he's part Maine Coon. So he's extremely vocal, loud, mischievous. He steals things out of the trash can. I had some tubes of probiotics that I'm taking because I'm on so many antibiotics. He stole a tube of probiotics, brings them out into the yoga studio, bites them open, spreads probiotics all over the studio. I let him out here because it's sunny and warm and he likes to be able to watch the birds and the bunnies and the mice or whatever travels by. And then I have to vacuum and clean my studio quite a bit, but I prefer dogs. I don't like cats. They're okay. Both of the cats think I'm their mother. So all night long, they lay on my stomach. They make biscuits in my arm. I even developed like this hard, rashy skin on the inside of my arm because they both think that this is mama's belly. I tolerate them, I like them, but I prefer dogs way more. All right, 2 more to go. Have you ever lived anywhere besides Colorado? Nope, don't want to, have no interest in it. I love where I live. I love Colorado Springs. I love my home. I sometimes dream of living in a small town closer to my youngest son and simplifying my life even more, making jams and jelly and sourdough and goat milk soap and just living off the land and being a homesteader. I don't know that that will ever happen. It will be really hard for me to leave my home here. And my other son lives here and my life is here, but I am very much drawn lately to simplifying and also creating. There's something powerful when we can grow and create food that sustains us, whether it's baking a loaf of bread or growing a vegetable garden or even a pot of herbs and then putting those herbs in a salad. There's something really soulful about that. So I've never lived anywhere else. My dad lived in Chicago and in Missouri, and I would visit there in the summers, but I never have lived anywhere but Colorado. All right, last question. And I'm going to do a series on this, maybe in a while, but the question is, I know nothing about chakras. What are they? I have a free ebook. If you go to the link below on the storefront, there's a free ebook on chakras, what they are, how to balance them. Basically, they're energy centers in the body that correlate to different habits and behaviors. They correlate to physical parts of us. They correlate to how we make decisions, emotional state of being. And in an ideal world, we want all of those energy centers to be balanced and open. A lot of times they will close up on us or they will be too broadly open and everything pours in or out. So there's 7 main ones. We have hundreds of them, but the 7 main ones are what we really study about and learn about. And they can really influence how you are in the world. For example, I talked about my root chakra being predominant. Sometimes it's too big, whether it's too closed and I'm fearful of losing money or losing things or losing opportunities and I clench down on it to stay safe, or it's so big that I can only see safety and security. Um, the second chakra relates to our relationships with other people, our one-on-one relationships, our friendships, our creativity, our sexuality, has a lot to do with money. So if that one's closed off, we have a fear of losing money, we have a fear of people, we have a fear of relationships, we don't do well, we're not creative. Doesn't mean an artist, it means creative, how you live your life in a creative form. The third one has to do with your relationship to yourself. So somebody who has an imbalanced third chakra is going to have very low self-esteem or incredibly egoic, where they're think they're better than everybody. So each has its, duality, right? The paradox, one end to the spectrum to the other. And ideally we want it just to be open and working. The heart chakra is really important, but overactive heart chakra, we can be loving so hard and so many people that we're not recognizing red flags, or closed heart chakra could be filled with hate, bitterness, and disdain. We have the throat chakra, which helps us to speak effortlessly and in truth. It has a lot to do with living in our truth. Our third eye is our intuition, our imagination, our ability to recall dreams, to have dreams. And then the last one that we focus on is the crown chakra, which connects us to all of the great goodness. And so there's a lot more to it, but each one also correlates to physical ailments. So we have lower back pain, hip pain, leg pain, foot pain, stomach pain, chest pain, heart disease, breast cancer, thyroid disorder, TMJ, shoulder pain, neck pain, headaches. See where I'm going? And so in an ideal body, and they change every day, we are balanced. So I have the whole series. It's a free ebook. It's just a download. You'll have it forever. And then I also have individual practices, study guides of each energy center that I'm going to also put up in my storefront probably probably this month, in the month of June. There's ways to balance them based on color, food, habits, essential oils, crystals, sounds, different tones can balance and open different energy centers. There's a lot to it, and it is a science that is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. It's not just some weird woo-woo kind of thing. There is science that is starting to correlate the vibrational frequencies of material things like stones, plants, people, all have a vibrational frequency, as does the energy centers in our body. And so when our frequency is aligned with the energy centers, we're golden. That's a Reader's Digest. Great questions. We covered personal stuff. We covered business stuff. We covered topics around yoga. We covered crazy stuff. So I'll probably do the Q&As maybe once a month or so, because I love to know what you want to know. I think having those conversations are great. If you have more follow-up questions, ask me, ask me, ask me. I'm a very private person, but I'm also a very open person. So whatever you want to know, I'll either answer it, I won't. Simple as that. So I got a new podcast coming next week that's going to be really good, really juicy. I'm thinking about it. I'm journaling about it. I'm sitting with it. I'm watering my garden with it. I can't wait to share more about it. But thank you to those who did write in for questions. I loved it. I loved knowing what you wanted to know, and I love sharing it. So thanks so much. And I'll see you all next week, and we'll go from there. It's going to be juicy. It's going to be good. All right. Keep the questions coming, and I will see you next week. Create your best life.